Welcome everybody to this brief at-home retreat on the nutriments of existence. I'm going to share the program for the rest of today. Welcome everybody to this brief at-home retreat on the nutriments of existence. Okay, so screen sharing is not working. Today's a retreat and the next few days will need to include the time that you will spend at home with your personal meditation practice, the times that we will spend meditating together, the times that we'll spend listening and discussing the Dhamma together, and as well a certain amount of time when you will be at home taking care of your necessary chores in life. Because of the topic of this retreat, I feel that the time that you spend on your necessary chores has the potential to be especially rich, especially fruitful and beneficial. So I hope to the greatest extent possible, the entire next day and a half will be that you'll be able to take it like the chores that you have to do is like your yogi job. You will be doing them at a slower pace than usual, being aware of the posture of the body, aware of reaching, picking up, moving, whatever the activities of the body are involved with doing what has to be done, and aware of the states of mind and the intentions and the feelings, all of the mental factors that come up while doing these regular activities of life. I'm going to be giving a talk in a few minutes, sort of an overview of this theme, followed by some guided meditation. As I was investigating what's been written and how the theme of the nutriments is explained in the suttas and how it's explained by some of the wonderful contemporary teachers, it seems clear to me that this is for a practice of insight. It's for a practice of developing the full understanding of the nutriments. And for this reason, I began to notice that the methodology of the Satipatthana Sutta is kind of a good match for what's the field of investigation that we have here with this particular theme. So therefore, the meditations that I'll be offering during those periods are going to be based on Satipatthana, but I hope that we can frame it so that you'll be able to see the relevance of Satipatthana to the nutriments. Today's program is going from 2 o'clock until approximately 4 o'clock. Then there's a break. Then at 4:30, we'll have another Dhamma talk, some guided meditation, and we close this program at 6 o'clock tonight. So that means that you'll have the whole evening to practice on your own at home. If you possibly can manage it, try not watching the internet or turning on the news this evening. And if you do, for some reason, have something that you must look at the news or you must check your emails, notice that the contact of those inputs coming in through the little screen is a different kind of a nutriment for different types of feeling and everything that arises from that. But the more that you can keep your days simple for the next period of time of this retreat, I think the more benefit you'll get. We tried to do the schedule partly in a way that would be compassionate for some of our friends on the East Coast. So tomorrow, we're starting this maybe very early for some of you in California. I don't know if you're used to getting up early, but we're going to invite you to join for our regular monastic program of silent meditation at 5 o'clock, followed by the morning chanting at 5:30 and reciting the reflection about the requisites. Then at 6:15, even before breakfast, I'm going to give you another Dhamma talk. At 7, take a break, get breakfast or take care of your chores. At 9:30, come back for meditation. At 10:15, welcome to have chores and take your meal on your own. Then at 1 o'clock, come back again for Dhamma discussion, followed by a guided meditation. And then I had indicated tomorrow at 2:30 a group discussion, which is intended for those who are sitting the entire retreat, or for those who are sitting almost the entire retreat, not broadcast on YouTube and not for people to just drop in on. Tomorrow afternoon, there's another time for mindful practice. I, in particular, notice it doesn't have to be in the afternoon, it could be in the morning. Notice that getting some kind of a little bit of brisk exercise during the day is really beneficial for meditation. Doing walking meditation, not necessarily at the slow pace, but having at least a few minutes of walking at a fast pace, or doing some yoga stretches or some other kind of mindful movement. At 6 o'clock, we'll have a meditation. And then at 7 o'clock, we are again falling into the usual monastic program. This is the same thing we do when y'all are not around, having the evening puja chanting, the reflection after using the requisites, and a Dhamma talk. So we'd probably be breaking pretty early, about maybe 7:15 or 7:30 would break for the evening tomorrow. And again, you'll have plenty of time to rest or do what's necessary, or if you've got the energy and the space and the momentum to continue practicing on your own, then certainly okay to stay up and meditate as long as you like into the night. On Sunday, again, the program's starting very early, and this formal part of this retreat is wrapping up early in the morning on Sunday, and then it's flowing into our regular Sunday program. So from 9 o'clock until 10:45, we'll offer guided meditation and a time for questions. That's a mistake. It should be 10:15. Guided meditation and time for questions. And then at 1 o'clock, we'll have a sutta study. So these things will be in the way of an enrichment or a continuation of the retreat. So you don't have to feel sad because you hardly got anything on Sunday, because you had an early morning program, the 9 o'clock program, and the 1 o'clock program on Sunday. Are there any questions about the program? Okay. Well, let me try to say a few things about the nutriments. On one occasion, there was a young novice who was very young. I think he was only 7 years old. But despite being a child, he became a fully enlightened arahant. And the Buddha asked a series of questions, you could say riddles, of this child. The answers to the riddles demonstrated that child really was fully enlightened. The first riddle is, what is one? And the answer to the riddle is, all beings subsist on nutriment. Or you could say, all beings settle on nutriment, or they settle on food. The question, what is one, is in Pāli, it's eka namakin, eka namakin. And the answer is sambe satta āhāra titika. So āhāra means food, and titika means taking a stand, coming to stillness, coming to stability. Now, elsewhere in the suttas, it says when one becomes entirely dispassionate or disillusioned towards one thing, when his lust or passion for it fades away entirely, when she is entirely liberated from it, when he sees the complete ending of it, then she is one who, after comprehending the goal, makes an end of suffering here and now. And what is the one thing? All things subsist by nutriment. That's the one thing. I don't know if anybody would, I have a logical question. When I read this, it's a very lovely short sutra with such a beautiful story about the enlightened child. And the answers to the other questions are also very sweet. This is sort of like a catechism that the people in the Buddhist countries learn by heart. The children learn it by heart. But all beings is not one thing, that's many beings. And nutriment is not one thing, there's four kinds of nutriment. So why is that called the one thing? And I have an idea about that, which is that the teaching about the nutriment is another version of the teaching about dukkha, about the nature of dukkha. And dukkha is the first noble truth. So the teaching about the nutriment has to be the first thing in the list, because dukkha is the first thing on the list, the first thing that needs to be understood. As we go through these teachings, I'll be going in a bit more detail later on about the four nutriments. These are phenomenon or factors or experiences which are conditions for the continuity of personal life or for the continued existence of an individual. So the nutriments are food, which is a supporting condition for the existence of a living human body. And I think you could see that having a living body is necessary for the existence of an individual. And then the next nutriment is called, so nutriment supports the continuation of life, of the life of the body. The next one is called contact. That's the contact through the senses, through the five physical senses in the mind. And contact is the nutriment for feeling. So contact supports the arising of feeling. And then when feeling arises, that is another powerful fuel, or you could say a food all by itself, a support for the arising of craving or thirst, the arising of our perceptions are even in a way conditioned by feeling. Like if you feel good, you'll perceive something as being nice. If you feel unpleasant, you'll perceive it as being not so nice. And then the volitional formation. So all of the other, the proliferation, the mental proliferation is powerfully fueled by the feeling. But the Buddha wants us to notice, where does feeling come from? It comes from the contact of the senses. So the contact is the second nutriment. And then the third nutriment is translated as volition. There's two different words that sometimes get translated as volitional or volitional formation. Sankhara, you sometimes hear of as all conditioned things, or you sometimes hear it translated as volitional formations or mental formations. Those are the castles that you build. When you create your world in your mind, you create a world, and then you get to live in the world that you created. That's all of that fabricating that the mind does. That's one thing. But then in this case, it's not that word. It's a different Pāli word. It's called mano sancetana. And cetana is a volition which is creating karma. So the karma is the intentional ethical activity that creates the conditions for subsequent pleasant and unpleasant experiences, and in particularly for what type of rebirth or what type of realm of existence we would be born into. And then this mano sancetana is kind of like a creative activity of creating the world. So with our intentions, we create our actions. With our actions, we create our character. And with our character, we create our destiny. So that's kind of like the sequence, how it grows from there, all starting from volition. So the Buddha wants it. I want you, like as you go through the meditation and through the day, notice when the body needs food and drink. Notice the consuming of the food, what really happens. Notice every contact as much as you can. Notice every time you do something on purpose, how that intention came along and how it grew until it reached a point where there was a decision to go ahead and do something, take some action. And then the last nutriment is called vijnana, or consciousness. And it's said that the food, which is consciousness, is the cause of rebirth into a new state of existence in the future. It's said that consciousness is the nutriment supporting name and form. This is sometimes just translated as the mind and the body. As we'll get into it, I'm going to explain to you a more subtle understanding of what name and form is. So when you name something, it becomes real to you in a different kind of way as a concept. And even after the form even after the thing that you named falls apart and deteriorates or dies, the name still exists. So then this naming is bringing something into existence as a definite something that could be known by way of a concept or by way of a verbal designation. And this when we apply it to ourselves, then I think you can sort of see how, if we want to live beyond this life, you might think that your name will live beyond after your physical death. Your name will still live on. And so this is some kind of this. It's the explanation that I know is very confusing to a lot of students. How is it that what they call rebirth consciousness is involved in rebirth, in this process of, at the end of one life, something going forward, which is taking on another life? And so this is why consciousness is part of the continuity of our existence, because consciousness is creating something which is reaching forward into time. And we'll be talking further about this. Some of the metaphors and teachings that we see, and also some of the modern teachings that we see about these four nutriments, to me, the way they're expressed could be misleading. They say that when you have craving, delight, and relishing for any of these khandhas, then the mind gets stuck in. It's an āhāra titika. So with the nutriments, the mind gets stuck into food, into the materialistic supports of life. The mind gets stuck into the contact through the senses. It gets stuck into our creative process of forming plans and intentions. And then the mind gets stuck into this knowing quality that places a concept on our own identity and the other things, the other objects that we experience. And so they want, the Buddha wanted you not to be stuck. He wants us to go beyond this craving and relishing of these things. And so then he gives these very frightening and gross metaphors and similes for how horrible it really is. And then I read modern teachers who sometimes say, oh, it's really awful with food. It's really awful because people are so greedy and they have world hunger because people are so ridiculous and foolish about food, and your food is killing you because you eat too much of it and you eat the wrong kind of food, and so many other ways that they're kind of like shaking their finger and saying bad, bad, bad. Food is bad. It's bad the way we take food, and that is good for if you needed to overcome your food addiction. But on the other hand, that kind of teaching seems to be kind of filled with aversion. And many students are not seeking to go from addiction to aversion. They're trying to find the middle path, which has an aspect of equanimity and an aspect of freedom in relationship to these nutriments. And so then what I notice about the four nutriments is that even the fully enlightened arhat is still participating in these four nutriments. So whether we are an uneducated, neurotic child who has got a completely confused approach to these things, or whether we're somebody who's on the path of training, or whether we're somebody who has some level of awakening, or whether we're fully enlightened, we still are using material food. We still are using the supports of life. But there's a way in which our understanding of it can be reconceptualized or reframed to have a completely different perspective, wherein you could, for the example of food, you could notice, like when the body needs food, so there's hunger. And what's that like? How it's manifesting with the body, how that's might be distorting the mind. And then if you come across some food and you can see the food and smell the food, especially as you begin to eat the food, you could notice it in the material body that you start to salivate, and the stomach starts to do its churning activity, and digestive juices start to get pumped out to be able to receive the food and break it down. And then at the same time that you're doing that, especially at the beginning of eating, it's very often accompanied by pleasure. And so you could just be like one part of you is as cool as a cucumber and says, okay, these five aggregates are experiencing pleasure with this beautiful food, which has perhaps been prepared in a loving and well-intentioned way, which perhaps has been given in a nice way. But without buying into the craving aspect of it, without getting involved in this relishing and going, yum, 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 yummy food, I love food, give me more food, more food, more food, not falling into that, but instead just reflecting, oh, this is how it's manifesting. Because of causes and conditions, being a human being, this is what I experience on eating food. And even one could be also aware of the dukkha aspect of food in terms of all of the hardship and labor that goes into the creation of food. Even that some beings could have given their life in order to become food, or some insects and worms and little small beings could have been destroyed as a side effect of the creation even of the vegetables. So then great compassion arises. And so, and then many other reflections about impermanence and non-self also can be developed as ways of reframing the experience of food, so that then your intelligent mind is having a lot of perceptions based in wisdom, even in the process of doing this basic process that we have to do, the process of eating. And then it's the same thing. Even an enlightened arhat, if you drop a stone on their foot, they could feel an unpleasant feeling, bodily unpleasant feeling, because of their foot being crushed. but I believe there's a similar kind of process that we can step back, and instead of being swept up and in a way seduced or helplessly following along after what our feelings are telling us to do, instead that we're able to stand back from it, so we have a certain amount of detachment. And then the same exact thing with karma. This is sort of a puzzle and a mystery, isn't it? That sometimes students might hear that a fully enlightened arahant or a Buddha is no longer creating any more of the type of khandha that would lead them to a rebirth into another life after the end of this life. And yet we know that the Buddha, even the Buddha or a fully enlightened arahant, does a lot of things on purpose. Intentionally, they do things. Intentionally, they decide to dedicate years of their life to teaching the Dhamma. Intentionally, they might decide, the Buddha decided, I will not come to let this earthly existence come to an end until there's the establishment of the fourfold Sangha, of the bhikkhus, the bhikkhunis, and the male and female lay followers, all of whom are well educated and accomplished in the Dhamma teachings, able to explain them and able to realize levels of awakening. And so that was intentional. The Buddha had an intention. So then if we realize that we shouldn't start to condemn ourselves or think that it's like opposite to a good Buddhist practice, if we have intentions and are doing things on purpose. Instead, we just need to reframe it so that we don't get lost in being attached to the outcomes of our intentions, and we don't let our intentions become such strong habit formations that we dig ourselves into a deep groove, which is leading us onwards into another existence. And likewise, the same thing with consciousness, the activity of consciousness in terms of discerning the objects that we discern. We can't get away from it. If you get a hold of it the wrong way, it's going to keep you going around and around in samsara. But if you get a hold of it the right way, or I should say, if you can hold it in a way which is detached with wisdom and compassion, then it's not necessary to have experienced these four nutriments as just keeping you endlessly going on a miserable treadmill of having to do the same things over and over again for one life, another life, another life. The nutriments are okay. They are dukkha. I explained that. And the normal operation of the nutriments with attachment. This is what causes us to experience the continuity within this life. And that something that seems like a continuity within this life then gets to be made into a concept of a self, and then that concept of a self being a delusion leads us to kind of go down several dead ends in terms of our potential practice. And this apparent continuity, it seems to be that way, but continuity meets impermanence. And you find that if you had exaggerated the concept of this continuity of existence into something like a blissful eternal self, then you would be disappointed. You'll be disappointed every time things keep changing. And that's the dukkha of the round. The nutriments are a special case of conditionality. So I told you at the top, and I'll repeat several times, how each nutriment is a condition that supports, it's like a nourishing and maintaining to support a continuation of something. But then the conditions also are somewhat, the nutriments are overlapping with the conditions that we see in Paticca Samuppada, in the teaching about dependent origination. And so it feeds, it just feeds over. So especially when we speak in terms of contact being a condition for feeling, and then feeling a conditioning for tanha or craving, craving being a condition for clinging or taking on an identity, or taking on ownership or possession of something. And then from the upadana, or this taking up or this clinging, comes the bhava, or existence, which means taking an existence in some realm of existence, like being in the realm where we are, in the realm of sense desire, or being in the fine material realm, or the formless realm. And then with this taking up an existence in a realm of existence, now we're getting into the Buddhist explanation of what's happening just with this moment of rebirth, how the consciousness jumps over. So with that taking up of some realm of existence, there comes to be birth. And then when birth happens, we're going around again. So that's one part of it. And then likewise, the teaching about vijnana, or consciousness, being the nutriment for name and form. That is a reference to the third and fourth factor in the 12 factors of dependent origination. So those two teachings are very connected. The main thing for your just getting started and practicing, as you go through these next couple of days of practicing meditation and being mindful throughout your activities of the day, if you would just remember that it's all coming from causes and conditions. Whatever we experience, whether it's pleasant or painful, whether it seems to be something skillful or it seems to be something unskillful, it's just happening because of causes and conditions. and try to watch for that. And when you notice causation in your actual experience, then try to look more deeply and try to really understand it and develop that kind of awareness. Then in the teaching about the mental volition, again, it's very useful thinking about our intentions throughout the day, through these next couple of days while we're on this retreat. Obviously, when one gets up from the meditation cushion, and then if we decide to tidy up the house, or we decide to prepare the meal or wash the dishes, we can see that we intended to do that, and we did it. So we did it on purpose by intention. Look more deeply. Is there any deeper way of seeing the intention? Are we washing the house, washing the dishes, or tidying the house because it's my job and I have to do it, or else somebody will scold me? That is, I'm doing it to avoid a scolding? Or am I doing it because having things clean and nice helps the mind to be peaceful? So doing it to make a support for this meditation retreat, a support for wholesome states of mind. And I'm not even saying to think that one is better than the other. Here's one for me. If a company is coming, I always want to wash the dishes and tidy the house. I don't know why. It just happens. Anytime there's a visitor coming, I always feel this wonderful burst of energy that enables me to go around and make things look a little bit nicer, a little bit better, because company's coming. And that's, it's part of some kind of intention, some kind of kindness or something towards that person. So know what your intentions are. Just know it as intention. And then with a consciousness, if you consider the rupa to be like the material reality that can be experienced, or which could even exist even if nobody's there to experience it, there's this material reality which is nameless. Like there's a boulder covered with moss in the wilderness, and there's no people around anywhere to give it a name. It just is. And then a person comes along and they may rejoice at how lovely and beautiful it is, and may say, how green the moss is. So now it has a name. It's the green moss. And it becomes captured as a kind of like a photograph in the mind that can be called up and remembered again and again for a long time. So this is could be a kind of a contemplation. What are you experiencing before you gave it a name? Or what was there before you gave it a name? and what happened when you put a name on it or when you put a concept on it. What is that about? That's the fourth nutriment and the fourth thing that could be contemplated. I was trying to give an overview during this hour, and the overview might have been a little bit too much. But I'm going to be going over the same ground more slowly in the following hours. And so there will be a chance to try to develop these ideas and make them seem to be more real and more useful. We have a few minutes available for questions or comments. And I think the comment I would like to hear from you is if anybody has an initial impression or an initial idea about how they can use this teaching about nutriments in their practice. What is this teaching about nutriments good for? Okay, I have an answer here in the room. Yeah. Nita Kanti is going to try and answer. Just
hello, everyone. I guess this is slightly sort of halfway related to the nutriments. I've been thinking about it while staying in the kuti in the forest. And it's when you're eating the alms food, you're practicing a lot of contentment with the food. And I thought, if contact is also a form of food or nutriment, when I meditate, I should practice contentment with all the sort of contacts that sort of arise in meditation, and seeing like how if I can be content with any kind of food, I could sort of transfer that into learning how to be more content with whatever I'm experiencing. And the breath can often like be like a bowl of plain oatmeal. Like the first breath, it takes some time to actually, but it helps a lot to just be content, I guess. That was my little contemplation.
indeed, trying to be content with any kind of contact. In the forest, they have a lot of different like chiggers and insects and things. And so that's as well as having the delightful, refreshing, cool breeze and the a delightful warm sun, which is not too warm out there in the forest, and the delightful feeling of the moist misty air early in the morning when you're living in a bit of a fog or a bit of a cloud. So such a combination of pleasant and unpleasant contact, and being contented with all of them. Yeah. Ananea.
What comes to mind for me is that it's an excellent means when one is actively working on the defilements and the release of the defilements. If one is really aware of what feeds it, then it's a mechanism that when you're experiencing that, or you feel it, one feels it come up, then putting attention to it and releasing it as quickly as possible, as a means to further disconnect and uproot the defilements.
Mm-hmm. So let me stay with you for another minute. If you suppose, say, there was food, and it could be either greed or aversion, one or the other could arise in connection with food.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, if the food is just the food, and that's kind of like the way that, or if one sees that the aversion is just arising from, the sight or the sound or the taste or the idea or the bodily reaction to the food is causing these reactions to proliferate. And then when you track it back and you say, well, the body feels pleasant or the body feels unpleasant, and then track back. And then finally, by the time you get to food, well, the food itself is neither good or bad. The food is just food.
Right.
And so then you've escaped from greed and aversion. Something like that?
Yes. And that, well, yes, it's basically helping you literally unplug, because you're not reacting to it. There isn't a pleasant, unpleasant association at that point. Once one tracks back, that's gone. You're left just with whatever the initial thing happened to be. And with food, that is particularly a rich place, because there's so much variety in people's reactions, can be so broad and extensive around food. So that one's kind of more obvious. But aversions, like if one hears something on the news, and then something's starting to arise with that, and a whole story is starting up. That is a nutriment for feeding the aversion and those kinds of feelings that arise with that, because we have particular beliefs. Those are more difficult than the food, because they're not concrete. Food you can actually see it or whatever often, and it's more obvious. But ideas, concepts, preferences, all of those rather are food to continuation of a particular type of aversion, or just aversion broadly.
Thank you. I'll call on Richard.
Thank you, Āhāra. In the Sammaditthi Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya, I think it's number 9, Sariputta mentions as the second way to completely understand right view as nutriment. And he says that, I'm just paraphrasing, that ultimately, by completely penetrating that, one can attain Nibbāna. But there's also another idea I want to bring up, which is the Buddha says in a particular sutra, I can't think of it right now, but that anything which is dependent on something else, an external, okay, like you have your body and it's dependent on father and mother, initially, right? And then it's dependent on nutriment, to exist and be maintained, can't be yourself. That you're dependent on two things which are temporary, father and mother and food. That's all temporary. It's always changing, right? Food, is food at first, but then it turns to something else, whatever, energy or bodily waste or whatever, right? your parents are, are temporary, they took birth and they're going to pass away. So anything which arises dependent on something that's temporary has to be temporary itself. And since the definition of an atta is permanent, that temporary thing cannot be the self itself. So anyways, that was just two things that came to my mind. Thank you very much.
Richard, I'm going to affirm what you're saying, especially with reference to this idea that nutriment needs to happen again and again and again. We have to have contact again and again and again. We have to have form intentions again and again and again and again. We have to have the moments of consciousness again and again and again and again. And so it's got this kind of quality, like it's the type of work which is never done. So that's it's the dukkha of the round, because it just has, like Sisyphus, we just have to be doing it again and again and again. And then with the realization and what it says actually in several places is that the reason for the contemplation of the nutriments is to develop the Nibbāna or disillusionment, so that one can then let go of the attachment to the nutriments, so that we don't have to keep doing that again and again. And that's where the breakthrough has happened. The breakthrough to Nibbāna is when we know, at least like if this is my last life, then I know I only have to have so many meals and so many moments of consciousness and so many sensory contacts. And then when this life is finished, it will be finished. And doesn't have to go around again.
Oh, excuse me. I forgot to add one thing.
Yes.
Let me just go and look at it. So in the Sammaditthi Sutta, the pattern that's given there is just like the Four Noble Truths. So, what is nutriment? What is the origin of nutriment? What is the cessation of nutriment? And what is the way leading to the cessation of nutriment? So
right. That's the reason why I say that nutriment is dukkha.
Right.
Well, thank you. Damon.
Thank you. With regard to consciousness, which is responsible, I think we could agree that this is where we are cognizing. And I've heard it said that cognizing is fundamental to human intelligence. So I hope that we'll learn in the course of the retreat how to make skillful use of consciousness, because without it, it's like not having air to breathe. Whereas on the other hand, it can be very detrimental. So yeah, I'm wondering, would you agree that, consciousness is fundamental and we have to do some of it?
Actually, all four of these nutriments are fundamental.
Okay.
All of them are fundamental to human existence, or even to the existence of any kind of a sentient being. And this is why we can't say that we're going to just give up consciousness as part of our path of practice. We're not able to do that. So we need to find a way to hold these. Actually, this is jumping ahead, but I'll spell it out a little bit farther. Consciousness, vijnana, has the ability to discern something like by taking the raw material of what's coming through the five senses, shapes and sizes and colors and movement, and then to cognize an object which is somewhat has a compact quality. Like, okay, this is a cup. This one is a cup. And this is not a cup. That's a head. So the head is one thing. The cup is a different thing. Each one has got, like, there's a boundary of the edges of the cupness. And I can see what things are part of the cup and what things are not part of the cup. And I can attribute, the mind does this, the mind knits it together, and it creates a sort of a continuity that is sort of saying, like, the cup is always the cup, or it's going to be a cup tomorrow, or it's going to keep on being a cup until it breaks. And same thing for the head, is going to be a head. And it's very defined what is part of the head and what is not part of the head. The cup is not part of the head. And so then this is like a consciousness does have this aspect of, like, creating meaning out of the massive flow of experiences coming in through the senses, and it's more it's even more clearly defined than perception, as we understand what the ancients were talking about. It seems that vijnana is a more clear definition than a perception, and then but then the consciousness has an ability to attribute the continuity in time and to be projecting something forward. And then it becomes called rebirth consciousness, where you think that, like, the concept of a cup will exist always. Even if there's no more cups in the world, there's still going to be an ideal cup somewhere in the world, the cup concept. And even if this head is turned into ashes, nevertheless, like, what is a head is, it's kind of a concept that has some existence beyond. And this is why it is said that when the vijnana settles into or becomes stuck on or becomes attached on its objects, it's creating the process that leads to rebirth. That's all I can. I don't think I'm going to be going through this again tomorrow afternoon. But we have to have consciousness. We can't do without it. And we've got to be able to tell the difference between the cup and the head. So we need, at the practical level, these things are an aspect of life. But we got to be able to see this is just the way, it's just something that consciousness is doing. It's not like a mystical reality or something like that. Patibara, do you still have a hand up?
I took my hand down because what you were saying kind of helped me understand what arose in my mind. But the more I'm listening to all of this, in my thinking, what's arising for me is this concept of the middle path in the practice, and taking a look at, for feeding all of the senses, what's functionally necessary for survival versus continuous desire and attachment for all of the foods for these senses. That there is a middle way practice engaging in not only understanding the purpose of the nutriments, but also understanding that and observing the desire for more and more and more and more. And so one of the things that I've learned with you at the monastery is food is one of those examples, that I will not eat for pleasure and yada, yada, yada. And that it applies to all of the form, all of the functions of the form. So with what you shared, it kind of helped me see that.
I'm going to come to Nirmala's comment, and then after that, I want to go into a bit of meditation. Nirmala.
Okay, I just had a quick question, Aya. Thank you for taking my question. So it looks I want to just clear my understanding. So it looks like food and the first two nutriments are manifested, and the second two are not unmanifested. Am I correct? So food and sense are all something we feel manifested. So we should pay more attention to the unmanifested because they're related and cause rebirth.
I'm not 100% sure what you mean by manifested. Usually food is considered like materialistic, and the other three are considered mental. So even though the sense contact seems very real because it's like there's an actual object which is impinging on the senses, but actually the process by which mind is able to receive like a visual or a sound or something like that is not that simple, and it does involve aspects of the mind are involved in that. So the sense contact is considered an aspect of mentality. You could say the five senses, the external objects that correspond to the five senses are external things. So, but then the internal faculty of seeing, hearing, tasting, or smelling is that's actually like an operation of the brain and the nervous system and the faculty of the mind to be capable of receiving those contacts. A person's intentions, they can be, although even though they're mental, they can be extremely real. And you know, like if you are in a crowd of people and some kind of like a violent harmful intention sweeps over the crowd, and the whole crowd becomes, you know, angry and starts shaking their pitchforks and thinking about making war or attacking somebody or something like that. It's like you can almost feel the intention with your body, because that the intention is it's not unreal. It's a real thing, even though it's a mental thing. This may be enough. Let's come to meditation. And I hope this isn't too much. Related to the Satipatthana Sutta, the sutta on the foundations of mindfulness. The first foundation is the body. And one of the first contemplations that's given connected with the body is the one that's called asubha, where a person examines their own body and the parts of the body. This contemplation is intended to through analysis to cut up the body into its parts so that the delusion or the illusion of a self is somewhat defeated, because you can't find the self in any of the parts. So I'm going to invite you to straight away come to an upright and balanced posture. Arranging the body so that it's comfortable to just sit still without having to shift around. Letting the body be very relaxed. Bringing into awareness the hair on the head. Aware of the color and the location. The shape. And then imagine taking off the hair of the head and put it down in front of you on the floor. And look at the hair separated from you. Aware of the body hairs, different kinds of hairs all over the body, the location, color, size, and shape. And imagine brushing off all of the hair from the body and making a pile of body hair on the floor in front of you, separated from your body. I'm bringing to mind the fingernails and the toenails, their location, their size and shape. And removing all of the fingernails and toenails and putting them in a pile on the floor in front of you, separated from you. Aware of the teeth in the mouth, their location, their position, standing in the gums. Their color, their size. And then removing the teeth from the mouth and putting them down on the ground in front of you, separated from you. Looking at them separated. Aware of the flesh of the body, the muscles. Their location all over the body. And imagine removing them from each part of the body. From the feet, the calves, the thigh, the front, the back, the hands, the arms, the neck, the shoulders, even the head. Imagine removing all of the flesh, all the meat, and put it down on the ground in front of you, separated from you. Aware of the sinews which were connecting the muscles to the joints. The shape and color and location of sinews. And removing the sinews from the body and putting them down in front of you, separated from you. Aware of the skin of the body. As if it was a suit of clothing. that you could unzip and take off and step out of the skin, removing the skin, folding it up, putting the skin down in front of you, separated from you. And then taking all of the bones in the body, from the skull down to the toes, taking all the bones, the whole skeleton, out of the body and putting it down on the ground in front of you, separated from you. Look at that pile of bones. Aware of the kidneys, where they're located. Somewhere around above the waist on either side. They purify the body. And removing the kidneys, putting them down on the ground in front, separate from you. Aware of the heart. At the center of the chest, pumping the blood. And then removing the heart, putting it on the ground in front, separate from you. aware of the kidneys, aware of the liver, sitting right next to the stomach, helping with digestion. Reading the nutriment for the body in a form the body can use. And then removing the liver, putting it on the floor in front, separate from you. Aware of the diaphragm, constantly contracting and relaxing, making the air come in and out of the lungs. Removing the diaphragm, putting it in front of you, separate from you. Aware of the spleen. It filters the blood. It's just below the stomach and above the intestines. Essential to life. Then removing the spleen and putting it down on the ground in front of you. Aware of the lungs, bringing the oxygen in and sending out the old air. Removing the lungs, taking them out of the chest and putting them down on the ground in front. Aware of the intestines in the belly, the small intestine and large intestine. And taking out the intestines, setting them down on the ground in front. Aware of the mesentery, that's a membrane that holds the intestines together, that keeps them attached. And removing the mesentery, putting it down on the ground in front. Aware of the undigested food in the stomach, in process of breaking down and becoming a nutriment for the body. Removing the undigested food and putting it on the floor. Aware of the feces in the large intestine, ready to come out. And removing the feces, putting it down in front, separate from you. Aware of bile, which helps with digestion. Taking out the bile and putting it down in front. Aware of the phlegm in the lungs or the sinuses. And removing all the phlegm, putting it on the ground. Aware of pus wherever there was a wound. Aware of blood. Throughout the body, bringing oxygen, bringing white blood cells. And removing all the blood from the body and putting it down in front, separated from you. Aware of sweat. Aware of sweat. Aware of fat. Aware of tears. Aware of grease. Aware of saliva. Aware of snot. Aware of synovial fluid, which lubricates the joint. All of these liquids in the body. Imagine removing them from the body and putting them on the floor in front. Aware of the urine in the bladder, ready to come out, and removing all the urine, putting it on the floor, separate from you. Aware of the brain, feeling the head and regulating the body. And removing the brain, putting it also on the floor. Just like a bag with openings at both ends, filled with various kinds of grain, like rice, wheat, beans, peas, sesame. Someone with clear eyes could open the bag and examine the contents, recognizing the different kinds of grains and beans. One can open the body, examining the parts and organs of the body. Just looking at the body, just as it is, with all of the parts. Asking which part is the real me? Which part am I? Please continue your sitting or walking meditation for 30 minutes and come back at 4:30 for another continuation of our Dhamma talk.